The top stories tonight in Y News. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has designated Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire as DOH officer in charge pending the appointment of a secretary.
The Department of Budget and Management disclaimed that the government's rightsizing plan would not automatically imply a reduction in the number of personnel in government agencies.
China has rejected anew the award on the South China Sea arbitration in favor of the Philippines by saying it is null and void and violates international law.
The International Monetary Fund reported that the global economic outlook has darkened significantly and warned that the situation could get worse.
Good evening, Philippines and the world. We are now reporting live from Cubao, Quezon City, and today is Thursday, July 14, 2022. Join us in the next hour as we deliver today's top stories around the Philippines and in other parts of the world. I am William Theo.
We are also seen in 1,935 satellite monitoring centers nationwide and via live streaming worldwide through the UNTV News and Rescue social media accounts. I am Herlene Delgado.
First in the news, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has designated Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire as the officer in charge of the Department of Health or DOH. This is while the president looks for his secretary. Nel Maribo has the story.
The Department of Health or DOH has appreciated President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr.'s trust in one of its career executives, as well as the immense responsibility that such trust brings. This comes after Health Undersecretary Rosario Vergeire was appointed as its officer in charge.
Si Dr. Rosario Vergeire, kasalukuyang pangalawang kalihim para sa Public Health Services ng DOH, ay itinalaga ng ating Pangulo bilang OIC ng Departamento.
DOH said it would work together with the new leadership to continue the achievements made by the previous administration. As it works towards universal healthcare for all Filipinos, it is also hopeful for the complete recovery of the country from the pandemic. Vergeire, on the other hand, thanked the President for the opportunity to serve the country in her statement. Her goal is to increase vaccination, stop the spread of COVID-19, and ensure the safety of healthcare workers. Secretary Angeles said in accordance with Memorandum Circular 1, Vergeire's term as OIC may be extended if the administration has yet to pick a DOH secretary after a month. Meanwhile, the palace did not say if President Marcos already has someone in mind to take the health secretary post. Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, we serve the people, we give glory to God.
A political strategist advises President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. to set policies and major targets before his first State of the Nation address or SONA on July 25, 2022. Rosalie Cons will tell us why.
Maluti Kia, a political strategist and the founder and CEO of Publicus Asia, said there is a large difference between former President Rodrigo Duterte and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s first 2 weeks. PBBM seems to be a cautious person and a consensus builder in comparison to the former president, who is a decisive one and had made firm actions during his first 2 weeks in office.
Ang hindi ko nararamdaman yung decisiveness ng 2 weeks. Kasi dun sa 2 weeks, ang lumabas lamang ay EO1, organize ang Office of the President, yung Office of the President proper, tsaka EO number 2, yung Office of the Press Secretary. So kung maghahanap ka ng programa, polisiya, wala pang nagagawa. Sa tingin ko, marami tayong tataas na naman yung level of expectation para sa SONA.
Thus, before his SONA on July 25, she enumerated several suggestions for the chief executive.
Get a team building session with the cabinet. That's one. Second, tell your cabinet what is your vision, what is your direction, What are the things you want accomplished?
Mhm.
Kahit sa kabinete man lang,
Mhm.
pag na-build mo yung team at alam nila ang direksyon, di ba? Madali na yung iba. Kasi kung dapat yung magawa bago ng SONA.
Expectations are rising for the Marcos administration as the first State of the Nation address approaches, she added. But there have been no clear directives from the president for his cabinet as of yet.
Nababagalan ako kung i-compare natin dun sa first 2 weeks ng dating Pangulong Duterte. Yung kataasan ng suporta ng tao, that's a lot of expectations.
Opo.
So dapat, ito ang priority ko ng first 100 days. Ito ang priority ko hanggang December. Dapat yun nagagawa nila.
Rosa Licoz, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
A group representing government employees opposes the proposal to right-size the government as they fear possible mass layoffs in the rank and file. Harleen Delgado will tell us why.
The Confederation for Unity, Recognition and Advancement of Government Employees, or COURAGE, strongly opposes the proposal to right-size the government. The Department of Budget and Management, or DBM, earlier supported the proposal in a bid to streamline the bureaucracy. The Group Secretary General, Manny Baclogan, notes that it has been proven ineffective in the past administrations only to make the bureaucracy worse.
Unang natatanggal sa trabaho ang mga ordinaryong kawani. Pero nadadagdagan pa rin ang mga empleyado, lalo na ang mga opisyal ng pamahalaan na ina-appoint sa ating burokrasya.
Some contractual employees fear they are the ones who will bear the brunt of the looming job losses. Kawani laban sa kontraktualisasyon or kalakon also laments the remark made by Budget Secretary Amena Pangandaman, where she said that the government will save 14.8 billion pesos per year should, for example, 5% of the over 2 million government employees will be reduced.
Ako po ay natatakot para sa mga kawaning kontraktual katulad namin, no. Binanggit niya rin na makakatipid ang gobyerno ng 14.8 billion. Yung 14.8 billion po na to ay halaga ng 120,000 na mga kawani na mawawalan ng trabaho. At alam po natin, ang mga kawaning kontraktual, ang unang-unang nawawalan ng trabaho sapagkat sila yung mga walang security of tenure.
They call on the government to focus not on eliminating employees in order to generate revenues, but on improving the tax collection in the country and addressing corruption. In a radio interview, Pangandaman says government right-sizing does not automatically mean reduction of personnel. She says strengthening of agencies are also possible, where additional employees will be hired with bigger budget allocation. The budget chief says no specific departments are identified yet for the upsizing, but they are looking at the education and health sectors. Employees who will be displaced may be transferred to upsized agencies and may undergo retooling and retraining. The DBM earlier noted that teaching personnel, health workers, and military personnel are excluded from the proposed right-sizing. Pangandaman adds President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. instructed the cabinet members to look into their respective departments for the possible right-sizing and positions which have been rendered as redundant. A proposed bill seeking to authorize the president to right-size the government is now being prepared in the executive department to be submitted to Congress before the president's State of the Nation address. Harleen Delgado, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God. Meanwhile, the Department of Labor and Employment certifies that the right-sizing in the government ordered by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will be carefully evaluated. Eileen Sarudo will tell us why.
There are concerns that some government employees will be affected by the right-sizing. Department of Labor and Employment Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma agrees with the proposed right-sizing in the government. However, he wants to make sure that no government employee will have their jobs compromised.
Ang nais ko sigurong ibigay na pananalita o commitment talagang pag-aaralang mabuti kasi the listing, pinakahuling bagay na gusto naming mangyari o makita mayroong mga dislocation ng mga manggagawa.
The Labor Secretary also assured that they will provide assistance to employees who will be affected by the right-sizing.
Yung sa mga maapektuhan, maliwanag naman na mayroong sinasabing pagbibigay ng tamang benepisyo, pagre-relocate sa kanila dun sa mga existing na vacancies, hindi man siguro sa particular na departamento, pero sa ibang mga departamento na pwedeng ang kanilang kakayahan ay tumutugma.
Vice President and Education Secretary Sara Duterte favors the rightsizing since it would improve government agencies and save funds. However, the Education Secretary said it is not yet the right time to conduct rightsizing.
I don't see it happening in the short term dahil mahirap po mag-right-size ng buong government. No, nahirapan nga kami doon sa LGU namin, all the more dito na buong national government. But I think it's a step, it's a good direction sa ating Pangulo para po nare-review natin kung lahat ba ng mga empleyado at lahat ng mga posisyon ay useful siya doon sa mga agencies and offices.
The Department of Migrant Workers, on the other hand, said they will first focus on streamlining transactions in their agency. According to Migrant Workers Department Secretary Toots Ople, conducting performance review of their staff will be forthcoming or once the department can provide fast service for overseas Filipino workers.
Sa ngayon, ang gusto namin talaga mag-focus on yung streamlining ng processes, yung rules na napaka-komplikado na kung wala kang abogado at ordinaryo ka manggagawa, maliligaw ka talaga sa dami ng provisions. And yung makat din yung processing time at yung accreditation time ng mga foreign employers kasi we are losing out on several markets dahil sa bagal din ng pag-process natin ng mga dayuhan na gusto lang naman makakuha ng mga manggagawa mula sa atin.
Meanwhile, DOLE and the DMW signed a joint circular aiming to speed up the transition period of the Department of Migrant Workers. The Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, or POEA, is now under the DMW under the joint circular. With this, the Migrant Workers Department is expected to become fully operational by next year. Eileen Cerudo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
U.S. inflation reaches a new high of 9.1%. Another jump in the inflation figure disappointed many investors as well as millions of consumers. Klein Sinka will tell us why.
Relentless rise in inflation at the United States of America continues to impact gas, food, and rent costs, registering another 40-year high, which could push the Federal Reserve to execute another huge rate hike at any moment. Prices increased 9.1% from a year earlier. Looking at the inflation's monthly progression, consumer prices jumped to 1.3%, the biggest leap since 2005, which last May a 1% rise has been observed. Other economists, however, are projecting that this will be the ultimate rate hike and that the inflation will gradually decrease. Like Ian Shepherdson, chief economist of Pantheon Macroeconomics, whose dictum could be compared to the declaration of some economists last spring that had turned out to be the opposite. As expected, the surge in June was led by fuel prices, which went up 11.2% from the previous month and consistently gone up 59.9% each year. Fortunately, the price for unleaded regular gasoline has averaged $4.65 on Tuesday, a few cents down from $5 in June. Other commodities that have shown price decrease include bacon, which fell 1.9% for 2 months straight, while beef and veal prices went down by 2.3%. Based on the Bloomberg survey performed by economists, the current inflation would rise to 8.8% and has been estimated as the largest gain since November 1981. Klein Sinka, UNTV News and Rescue, USA. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, has lowered their expectations in terms of global economic growth due to increasing inflation rate worldwide. Joselito Liquido will tell us the details live. Yes, Joselito?
Good evening, Kath. IMF's Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva stated that the expectations for the global economic growth will be lowered this month due to the war in Ukraine and the ongoing pandemic. The latest forecast released in April was 3.6% growth this year and the next. The forewarning comes as the United States, the world's biggest economy, reached a 40-year high inflation rate at 9.1%. Ms. Georgieva wrote in a blog spot that inflation has broadened beyond food and energy prices. That has led to many central banks to increase costs of borrowing, which stated that it will need to continue. Canada, which suffered an inflation rate at 7.7%, is the latest major central bank to increase interest rates, raising its main rate from 1.5% to 2.5%. Tiff Macklem, the bank's governor, said that the inflation rate is the highest in almost 2.5 decades. The IMF says 75 central banks have raised interest rates in the last year, and the pattern needs to continue, or else even more harm to growth and employment will be anticipated. The IMF had also suggested to end restrictions on food exports many countries have imposed since the war in Ukraine, and the world's richest countries should provide urgent support to the most in need. Back to you, Kath.
Thank you, Joselito Liquido, for that live report. Homes and establishments in some areas in Manila, Makati, Pasay, Las Piñas, and Parañaque will experience water interruption for around 18 up to 36 hours. Ray Pelayo will tell us why.
The construction of the road and drainage system along Pureza Street in Manila accidentally damaged the pipe of Maynilad last Monday. According to Maynilad, repairs for the damaged pipe will be underway, which means no water for several of their customers. Maynilad estimates that around 232,000 water service connections will be affected by the water interruption in the cities of Manila, Parañaque, Pasay, Makati, and Las Piñas.
Medyo mahaba-haba po yung service interruption kasi kailangan po natin mag-sara ng valve sa trunk line para fully ma-dewater yung pipe na nasira nitong private contractor.
Residents have begun storing water to prepare for the hour-long water interruption.
Maaga mag-imbak kasi kailangan ng mga panlinis panghugas ng mga tray, mga lulutuin.
Maapekto sa pang-araw-araw to, mga puwapasok sa trabaho.
Maynilad said that they will deploy water tankers in affected areas to provide water supply for residents. Specific barangays that will be affected are posted in Maynilad social media account. Ray Pelayo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Meanwhile, China insists that it will not accept the 2016 West Philippine Sea arbitral ruling in favor of the Philippines, while the Philippine government rejects attempts to undermine the historic victory over China. Dante Amento tells us why.
Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said in a statement the 2016 South China Sea or West Philippine Sea Arbitration Award violates international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, also known as the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea or UNCLOS. China insists it is illegal, null and void. Wenbin added that China observes international rule of law but would not accept or respect the landmark ruling. The foreign official also charged the United States with breaching its commitment to take no position on sovereign claims over the disputed islands. China and other ASEAN member states are supposed to agree that the West Philippine Sea issue, such as maritime disputes, should be handled directly by the countries involved through dialogue and consultation. Meanwhile, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo stressed the findings on the West Philippine Sea are conclusive as they are indisputable and the award is final. Manalo adds attempts to undermine the award or ruling would also be strongly rejected by the country. Earlier, Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Romualdez, explains, though we assert our rights on the West Philippine Sea, our position on the other hand is to resolve issues peacefully or in a diplomatic manner.
We remain optimistic that the best way forward is still diplomacy. Nevertheless, we are prepared to deter or deter aggression, and we believe in the merit of finishing negotiations on a code of conduct in the South China Sea that claimant states, including China, must agree on.
Since the 2016 arbitral award, the Philippines has filed over 300 diplomatic protests against China. Dante Amento, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
U.S. President Joe Biden has discussed the possibility of using military force as last resort against Iran's nuclear program. Paul Gatchalian will tell us the details live. Yes, Paul?
Kat, Biden expressed his strong determination and assurance to Israel in stopping Iran's growing nuclear program in his first visit to the Middle East on Wednesday. The U.S. president was welcomed by Israel's top political leaders in a red carpet arrival ceremony at the Tel Aviv airport, where he described the relationship between Israel and American people in his opening remarks to be bone deep. In an interview in Israel, he stated that the only thing worse than the Iran existing now is an Iran with nuclear weapons. Iran has long been considered as Israel's greatest enemy due to Iran's consistent calls for Israel's destruction, its continued support for militant groups across the region, and its growing nuclear program, which is why Israel's leaders have made Iran's nuclear program one of its top items in its agenda in the U.S. president's visit to the country. Meanwhile, Israel and the U.S. are expected to issue a joint statement cementing their strong military ties and reinforcing their previous discussions to take military actions to stop Iran's nuclear program this Thursday. Kat?
Paul, with the current meetings in regards to Iran, is President Joe Biden considering the review of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a recognized terrorist group in the U.S., which is the main reason why Iran is prevented from joining the Iran nuclear deal?
Well, Kat, currently Joe Biden has mentioned that he will not remove the current sanctions imposed to IRGC, despite this being the main factor why Iran cannot join the Iran nuclear deal. Back to you, Kat.
Thank you, Paul Gatchalian, for that live report. The Tokyo court has ordered former directors of the Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, to pay billions of dollars in damages to the company. Charis Longbowen tells us why live. Charis?
Good evening, Kath. 4 ex-bosses of Japan's electric utility company TEPCO were found accountable for the damages over the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. Plaintiff's lawyer Hiroyuki Kawai said the lawsuit was filed with the intention of making the directors pay for the losses the shareholders incurred. The plaintiffs argued the Fukushima nuclear disaster could have been avoided if the TEPCO directors listened and carried out preventive measures. TEPCO declined to comment on the ruling, saying it will refrain from responding to matters related to individual lawsuits. The 13 trillion yen or $95 billion compensation is the largest amount awarded in a civil lawsuit in Japan. Shareholders who filed the lawsuit were present at the Tokyo court Wednesday. They lauded the ruling as they held up banners that says shareholders win and responsibility recognized. Kath?
Therese, how about the situation of the community near the Fukushima nuclear complex? Have they returned to their area since the nuclear disaster?
Kath, there is still a no-go zone surrounding the Fukushima facility, and authorities say that the decommissioning activity is expected to continue until 2041 to 2051. Back to you, Kath.
Thank you, Charis Longbowen, reporting live from Japan. More than 80 cities in China have issued their highest red alert warnings after consecutive days of increase in temperature. According to the Central Meteorological Administration, the central and eastern regions have issued warnings and are expecting temperatures to rise above 40 degrees Celsius in most provinces. Residents have found ways to escape the heat by staying at air-conditioned subway stations, air raid bunkers, public fountains, and the riverside. Furthermore, street vendors have reported an increase in sales of ice cream and melons, while water parks have also seen an increase in visitors due to the heat surge. The Central Meteorological Administration has advised residents to avoid outdoor activities and take precautions to prevent heat strokes and fires. And those are the reasons behind the news in other parts of the globe. I'm Kat Tumaraos, live from Bangkok, Thailand. Good evening.
The Department of Education will not limit the size of classes once face-to-face learning begins. Janice and Hente will tell us why.
In comparison to previous Department of Education guidelines where school must limit the number of students who will participate in face-to-face classes, Education Secretary Vice President Sara Duterte said that the latest department order will not limit the size of students per classroom once in-person classes begin.
Hindi po kami naglagay ng exact size ng class dahil iba-iba po ang situation ng lahat ng mga schools natin. There are no schools na pareho sila exactly sa kanilang classrooms and sa kanilang teachers. So ang nilagay natin doon at inapprove din ng Pangulo during the cabinet meeting is physical distancing shall be implemented whenever possible.
To reduce the risk of COVID-19 and other infectious diseases, Duterte stated that among the guidelines in a recently released department order were instructions on how to conduct mealtime in schools, stating that students, teaching and non-teaching personnel are strictly prohibited from eating together while facing one another. Also, there will be no segregation of children vaccinated against COVID-19 and unvaccinated.
We don't see any problem with commingling sa loob ng mga eskwelahan dahil paglabas naman po nila sa eskwelahan ay naka-commingling po lahat ng vaccinated and unvaccinated natin sa mga bahay, sa mga malls, sa mga simbahan, sa public transportation. It should not be different doon sa loob ng ating mga eskwelahan.
The Vice President reiterated that the opening of schools on August 22 will push through. Janice and Hente, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
An infectious disease expert believes that the Philippines' COVID-19 situation is moving to the endemic phase. JP Nunez explains why.
Even with the increase in COVID-19 cases, the number of severe and critical patients is still lower than in previous surges in the country. Dr. Edsel Salvana, an infectious disease expert and member of the Department of Health's Technical Advisory Group, believes that the worst stage of pandemic has been exceeded. He explained that with the vaccination drive, COVID-19 deaths are nearing the surges of last year, even with the threat of Omicron and its subvariants.
Yung Delta dati, ang pinakamasama talaga if you count the number of deaths. Even though almost triple yung cases na nakita natin sa Omicron nung January, yung number of deaths was nowhere near that of yung nakita natin sa Delta. So dun pa lang, masasabi na natin na because of vaccines, the worst is really over for the pandemic.
The infectious expert believes that the pandemic is nearing the endemic phase. He clarified, however, that it will still be dependent on the public's response to continuously adhere to minimum public health standards, such as wearing a face mask and getting COVID-19 vaccines, especially the booster dose.
Overall, the vaccines are doing the job in keeping the number of severe cases low. So, papunta na yan sa endemicity. It's really just a matter of time kung kailan i-declare ng WHO, and we can help that along by getting vaccinated and getting boosted and wearing masks para mas mabilis tayo makarating dun sa point na yun.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization states that COVID-19 pandemic is still a public health emergency of international concern. WHO encourages all nations to continue their vaccination drive, particularly its citizens. JP Nunez, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Our kasangbahay, as the world faces these trying times amid the pandemic caused by coronavirus, we are inviting everyone to join the Global Prayer for Humanity from Monday to Friday, 9:30 p.m. Philippine time through the social media accounts of Members Church of God International.
Before we close, we will leave you with a word, giving glory to God. From the book of 1 Peter, chapter 1, verse 24, it says, "For all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of grass. The grass withereth, and the flower thereof falleth away." Those are the reasons behind the news July 14, 2022. Reasons we deliver to you as they unfold. I am Hardin Delgado.
And because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am William Theo. We serve the people. We give glory to God.